Hello, my name's John Haldeman. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of new exciting features we have for Guardium around compliance capabilities. This is currently available in GDSC, formerly known as Guardium Insights. Should be available in the SaaS environment very soon. Also thinking about moving some of these capabilities to GDP, so watch this space. All right, so if you think about compliance in general, you might have seen something like this in experience. You have these external rules, regulations, and industry best practices, and those get boiled down by a security group within an organization or some auditors into internal security standards. These internal security standards define what's applicable to the organization, because not all of the external rules and regulations are. And so also there's a lot of duplication within external rules and regulations, and so this is what the organization is meant to follow in order to be compliant. Often this is what some people mean when they talk about using Guardium for compliance, is to be compliant with those internal standards and implicitly compliant with the external ones. So you take those internal security standards and then you implement, discovery or auditing or assessments and inventories. You use another technology for that. You use Guardium for that. That's the meat and potatoes, the bread and butter for Guardium. And then if you get a little bit more advanced, after maybe you've done that for a little while, you start to maybe build statistics and metrics around your compliance environment. That's the last box here, where you want to understand, are you compliant now? Have you been compliant in the past? Am I deviating from being compliant, so that that would be a bad thing. So you can sort of fix that. All right, so where have we concentrated? Normally, mostly in the first area, where Guardium has created accelerators, like for things like CCPA and GDPR and PCI and SOX and other regulations. So we've had this as far as I've ever used Guardium, for a very long time. We've had these accelerators or templates, or sometimes you create something called a workspace. So we've concentrated in that area. And we've also concentrated, like I mentioned, in the meat and potatoes, and in the metrics area, we've done a little bit of coverage. So these two new features before we get there, so what do customers do to sort of like fill in the gaps? Because you still have these internal security standards, and you still have a need for metrics and reporting current compliance status. And so they use effectively productivity software. They use Word, or they use Excel to maybe map our internal security standards to what's built in Guardium. Back when I was in services, this was called a requirements mapping document, but you can imagine what that would look like. And then at the end, they would extract data out of Guardium into like Excel spreadsheets, and then maybe build some graphs, and then display those graphs in a PowerPoint presentation that they could then show to their management and other interested parties. So that's sort of where customers are right now. What we built is some additional features to help with before you get to Guardium, and after you've used the core functionality of Guardium to help with compliance. So compliance controls helps you define a mapping between what your requirements are and what was implemented within Guardium. That metadata mapping's quite useful. Normally it's a separate document, but those documents go out of date, and so it'd be nice to have it within the product so that you can see it right there. And then we need a way to monitor our current compliance, and so in terms of metrics, and so we've created compliance thresholds and the hub to show you your current compliance status based on some flexible metrics that you can define. So those are the exciting new features I want to talk about. Let's go take a look at what those are. All right, let's get started. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're dealing mainly with controls and thresholds in this demo. So let's go to create a compliance control here in the getting started area. It's also available on the left here under intelligence. So as I mentioned before, controls, the primary function of them is to take a requirement and map it to specific Guardium definitions, and which means we need requirements. So let's take a look at Go ITS 250. Governments are kind of fun in that sometimes they will publish their security, internal security requirements broadly for the public to see. Government Ontario is one of those governments. If you don't know, Ontario is the largest province in Canada. That happens to be where I live. And so here's Go ITS 250. If you take a look, there's a lot in it. But the ones one control I'm going to show you today is for appropriately enough activity logging, and so we do a lot of activity logging in Guardium, as you probably know. And we're going to look for the issuance of, well, we should monitor, store in a central location, etc. The issuance and use of privileges if granted, and then once we store them, we should also make sure that a change control process was managed for the change in or granting of access. All right, so we got those things. Let's take a look, and okay, so there's a bunch of templates for controls right now. Right now, only 7. We're going to include more, but there's one that's similar to this, which is monitor and review the changes to permissions. So we'll pick that template, so we don't have to create our own custom one. That would be an option, though. We'll keep the same name here. And we'll take a look at the requirements. Like I said, we're mapping requirements to specific Guardium definitions. And so we have PCI DSS 10.2. This is a global standard for if you're processing credit card information. So presumably the government of Ontario cares about that because they do process credit card statements, but they probably don't care about HIPAA, and they probably don't care about NIST since those are U.S. regulations. And so let's add our own, though, for ITS, our own internal ones. For Go ITS 250, we're going to add 342 F. All right, and then we're going to put it in the description. We'll just copy and paste this. Okay, so we'll probably create separate entries for the rest, right? So for A, B, C, D, but we're just concentrating on F right now. We'll come back to those later, maybe in a future video. All right, so now we have that requirement. We're also going to put in the same requirement for the same control for 36356 E. All right, this is also a Go ITS 250. All right, so now we have our requirements, and now we need Guardium definitions. We need policies and reports and workflows. If you're creating a custom control, you just go off and do that, create the policies, reports, and workflows. We try to make it easy so you can actually do that within the controls interface. But for a template, it creates it for you. So it's going to create a report and an execution grant revoke statements and a workflow and some policy rules so that you don't have to. The good news is these are all templates, so you can go and modify them after the fact if you would like. So let's create those. Great, so now we have our control, and our control is attached to one report, 2 policies, policy rules, and 1 workflow. It's also attached to a threshold. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you can see, okay, so now I know I have these specific requirements. It's stored inside Guardium, and these are the definitions that relate to it. Good news, I can just use this interface to go and navigate to my report for the specific control and run it. I can go and also modify this report and customize it in case I want it to display different kinds of information, right? So these are all my grant and revoke statements. So that's perfect. It can be a new way for you to navigate Guardium, so you don't have to go through, this whole big list of reports without context of what report is related to what specific business need. You have it now inside the controls interface. So you can access your control and then access all of the definitions, the reports, the workflows, the rules. You can add groups in here too, add new components. One thing I didn't have in here was the groups. And if you want, because they're built-in groups for grant and revoke, but if you want to, you, like I mentioned, you can just add your specific groups or other Guardian definitions directly to the control. Great. So that is controls. All right, so let's talk about thresholds. So as I mentioned, right, so now we have the mapping of compliance controls to our compliance our definitions within Guardium to our internal security standards using a compliance control. You don't have to have as much manual documentation anymore. But we also want to be able to monitor the status of that control. So if you remember, this is really all about making sure that a change control process must manage the requests for change in or granting of access after you log them. So we want to log them. That's what the policy rules handle. But then we want to review the data to make sure that a change control process was executed. And so let's actually go to our workflow and change some of the instructions. So we got this instruction here to run a report. Let's tell the reviewers to, instead of reviewing the grant and revoke statements to help ensure least privileges are being followed, maybe that's part of the change control, but we really actually want them to review the grant and revoke statements to make sure the Government of Ontario, so Government of Ontario change process was followed. Right. All right. So we'll modify that workflow. So like I said, these are all templates, so you can go and customize them to your heart's content. And then we also want to sort of measure whether people are reviewing the report to make sure that the change control process was followed. That's what thresholds are about. So that's what we can effectively have. What the threshold does is it creates a metric or a KPI so that you can see how reviews are going, right? So we run this report on a weekly basis or daily basis. You can modify that depending on what your need is. But what we want to know is what the average age of the workflow tasks are, to make sure that people aren't letting the workflow aren't ignoring those specific tasks. So what do we do? Well, thresholds work on reports, and we take the age, the total age of all the open task lists, all the open tasks, and we divide by the count of all the open tasks. And then we've defined a threshold here saying that if the average age of the open tasks is over 14 days, then you consider to have poor performance. If it's between 7 and 14 days, it's fair, and if it's less than 7 days, your open tasks have been reviewed within a week, then it's good. All right. Right now, today we haven't had any open tasks. We haven't run the workflow yet, and so our current metric value is 0, right? So we have 0 day. The average age is 0 days. Great. So that's how thresholds work. This is all configurable by the user as well. So it works on reports, and reports are customizable so that if you need to add exceptions or other items, you use different columns or something like that, you can change the measure or the metric. The measure is effectively the numerator, the thing on the top, and the metric is the denominator, the thing on the bottom. If you take the sum of a value and you divide by the total number, that's an average, which is why we have open task average here. And so, okay, so that's how that's also completely configurable and customizable. And then if the user wants to, they can adjust the threshold ranges. So maybe this is too strict, and maybe they would like to give people 3 weeks to close their workflow tasks, and so they could adjust this here. Or maybe that's like maybe our internal requirements are more strict, and so we'd like to have that be 4, and this to be like 5 business days, right? Oh, 5 days. We want this to be 10. Yeah, so it's completely configurable. And then there's a recommendation here, so in case you fail. So if you fail, what should you do to improve the threshold? Well, you're going to regularly review audit tasks related to grant and revoke executions. And if you do that, your average age will go down, average age of open tasks, and your metric will go your metric will hopefully go green if you're doing poorly. Okay, so that is metrics. Okay, so the last thing I want to show you is the hub. So the hub is a place where you can get all of the thresholds, the metrics, and displayed in one place to give you a view of what your compliance status is at this point in time. So we only have one control, and it was good. It's good today since there's nothing, there have been no reviews yet. And so, yeah, everything's looking good. Not very exciting, this particular hub. Here's one that's a little bit more developed. Okay, so this shows that we have 8 total controls, and 6 of them are in good status. 2 of them are in not. So effectively, our score here is about 75%. And so you can take a look at what the good controls are. Well, good thresholds are. So we have the percentage of assets with no vulnerability assessments configured. Okay, so we've got pretty good coverage for vulnerability assessments. Same thing for data discovery and classification. Pretty good coverage there. We've got the open task average age, so the access to sensitive data is being reviewed on a regular basis. That's great. Changes to data by administrative users, that's also being reviewed on a regular basis. Good work. And then percentage of assets with monitoring active. Okay, our monitoring coverage is good too. So we know those are currently good controls. What about poor ones? Oh, grant and revoke execution. Okay, so that's the one we just talked about. In this environment, they're sort of lagging on their reviews of that. So that's currently poor. Also, the number of current open risk events per server IP. Let's go look at that one. So this basically says the current number of monitored servers, right? Well, the open risk events divided by the current number of monitored servers gives us our average risk events per server currently open, right? And so if we had more than 3 of those, we rank poorly. We can improve it by going to our risk events and taking action. Okay, and currently the result is 4.5. Okay, so let's go look at that in more detail. What's the history here? Okay, so this is a brand new control. It was just created a couple days ago. Well, brand new threshold created a couple days ago, and the it was 0 back then, but it looks like we've had a bunch of new risk events recently, and so that is 4.5. I should go. I can go and look at this measure report here, and see all of the currently open risk events. Just have to set my time frame here. Okay, so here's all the currently open risk events. It looks like there's 9 of them. Okay, they were created all on the 13th, all today. I guess it is March the 13th, my unlucky day. Bunch of risk events. So let's go to what we can do is we can go into the risk events area over here, or access the risk event area from our control. Let's go to our control, show you what that looks like. So this is, even though it's a DDR function, it's it's part of compliance for like PCI DSS 10.6 that you look for anomalies and suspicious behavior, and so that's how it's in the compliance feature. But let's look at the risk events, right? So we include a link here, because the best place to deal with your risk events, your anomalies in GDSC is inside the risk events area. Okay, so now we can action these. We can go and do the, not going to demo that because you've probably seen that before, but there's many other better demos. We can action these, either close them or after we've investigated, or escalate, and so on. But to try to get our number down, to get the number of unactioned risk events down. So that's the power of applying metrics to your Guardium deployments, is that it encourages people taking action to reduce risk in the environment, or at least comply by specific requirements. Good. All right. So that's how controls, we're mapping specific compliance, internal standards, external standards to specific Guardium functionality. And thresholds, we're building a set of a framework. We've built a framework so that you can build metrics to encourage people to stay compliant, or other things too, but stay compliant, so that you don't slip and get a nasty surprise during your audits.